Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I'm your host, Charles. Along with me, as always, my co-host, editor, producer, co-pilot, gunner, navigator, and good friend of mine, Jacob Gloth. How you doing today, Jacob?
That's a bit of a stretch. I don't know if I'd use that word.
Okay, how about podcast acquaintance?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Podcast acquaintance of mine, Jacob Gloth. Are you ready to pitch a brand new televisual series for our listeners and ourselves to imagine?
No, I'm not, because it's your turn.
It is my turn. I am ready to pitch a whole new series. And I have to say, I'm pretty happy with this one so far. You know? I wrote... how would you describe it? Because you say one page is just one side of a page. And I say one page is one page front and back.
So what would you say is one page just front? Would you say half a page, Charlie?
I wouldn't. You're right. I wouldn't.
Yeah. So
I would say I have 6 pages written for this episode, which is exciting for me.
What kind of dumb statement is that? When you read a book, is the front and back of a page that?
No, but I regard my own work. Page? I regard my own work
on the
with less
back of the page, Charlie.
Respect than I regard other people's
What about when
work?
you're writing a Google Doc, right? And it's on the internet.
Yeah.
Is every 2 pages one page?
It depends on how you count it.
See, this is why.
This is why he hates me, folks. So
this is why we're podcast acquaintances and not friends.
That makes sense. All right, so this show, it's called Corruption of the Innocent, and it is about a detective for superheroes. All right, so he works cases for superheroes who don't want to get the regular police involved, you know?
Oh, so if you're like you're not Batman, you're like somebody that you got the superpowers, but you don't really know how to find stuff. In case
you're not like the great detective, you can hire, this guy, Detective Smoke is his name. To solve the case for you. And the case could be a cheating partner, to a murder, to like smuggling, anything, He's the guy. All right, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Detective Smoke. So, he is the former teen sidekick of a hero by the name of Malice, who is a masked vigilante with no superpowers and a cape. Guess where I got the inspiration for that one?
Green Arrow.
Yeah. And he was kicked off of Malice's team for undisclosed reasons as of right now.
Oh.
And he is cynical and knowledgeable, and he has a kindness in his soul that he tries to hide, with a demeanor of anger and, cynicism.
Yeah.
He works towards a greater good, but he does it without irreparably crippling goons. That's kind of the big conflict between Malice and Smoke. Is that Malice, he's kind of everything I think is bad about Batman. He's this absolutely amoral lunatic who won't kill anyone, but he'll do pretty much anything else. Like, he'll put you in a coma. He'll cripple you from the neck down, He's that kind of a guy. And Smoke is like, we don't need to do that. We're trained well enough that we don't
Batman's
need to.
Not like that.
Yeah, but some versions of Batman are kind of crazy like that. And so he is currently working out of a small bodunk office above a villain hideout called Sinner's End. It's basically just like above. Yeah, above.
So he hangs out above the hideout.
Yes. It's a bar, and he has the second floor is his apartment.
How does he have this? Like, don't they know who he is?
Yeah, because the villains and the heroes don't, they don't fuck with him. Because he kind of works for the villains, too. If the villains need help with something, they'll hire him. So he's kind of, he's a neutral ground situation.
So, like, this place is like, it's like the Continental in John Wick.
Exactly. No one's going to kill anyone inside of Detective Smoke's detective agency for detectives. And he has a working relationship with an extra-dimensional imp known as Goraxix, who has been trapped on Earth with far reduced powers and is currently working as his secretary. Alright? So that's kind of the setup. Detective Smoke He's a detective for superpowered individuals, and he has a secretary who is Goraxis, who is a pre-dimensional imp. He was around before this dimension, and he was just shot out into this one, and he's been trapped on Earth with far reduced powers, and so he's working as his secretary. And Detective Smoke does have a superpower, which sets him apart from every other sidekick that Malice has ever taken on.
Any other something lame, like he can see light where it used to be?
Well, no, I wanted to take a trope of classic detective noir fiction and turn it on its head. So, you know how detectives in those noir movies, they're always smoking, right? And so that's the same is true for Detective Smoke, but he's able to control the smoke with his mind, kind of like Magneto.
Oh, so he's a smoke. He can control smoke. So if he's smoking a cigarette, he can
take the smoke
like a big,
into a sword,
mist and like a smoke bomb. Oh, he can make a sword.
He can make a sword. Like he can turn the smoke in. He affects the molecules to make it hard or softer or whatever. Oh,
that's cool. It's like a Green Lantern sort of thing where he can make objects that he wants to.
Exactly.
With the smoke.
And he can make a gun cup. And it shoots a bullet that's also made out of smoke. But if it leaves his sight, if the bullet he fires the bullet and it goes past where he can see it, the bullet just turns back into smoke. He has a range at which his powers are effective. But he has powers, which makes him very unique in the League of Sparrows, which is Malice's,
League of Sparrows.
Team fighting, teen sidekick league. Malice is a grizzled superhero with an enormous family of children turned crime fighters, and also a founding member of the WBO, the World Betterment Organization.
Going straight into the parody, I see.
Yeah, a little bit. It's a little bit of parody. It's a little bit of...
A little bit of parody? Are you kidding?
I mean, the Batman one's probably the closest. But, to the any of the parodies. But I kind of want to do it like in, Invincible, right? Where there are obvious... Invincible's, all their characters have obvious parallels to, classic comic book characters, but they're different enough that they kind of become their own individual characters. And I kind of want that with Malice and the whole group of people in the show, right?
Okay.
So Malice, he's cruel, he's mean, and he's set in his ways, right? He's a real big prick, this guy. And he has 15 kids. They're all sparrows, and they all work for him. And when they finish working for him, they either, retire, they die, or they continue being superheroes in their own rights, right? And so the last few characters that I'm going to introduce now are Eternal. She is an ancient alien who erupted from hibernation during the 1940s and has battled for mankind's benefit ever since.
Okay.
She is naive and often takes people at their word and is often preoccupied with world-ending events. She's often dealing with
Wonder Woman.
She is kind of a mixture of Wonder Woman and Superman. So It's also going to be theorized that her crashing onto Earth was the comet that killed all the dinosaurs, right?
Oof.
So she is very, very old, but she's been in hibernation for a very long time, and then she was unearthed by the Nazis. And she was like, these guys are bad news bears, and she went to help, And then our final character, and she's naive, but also she's not stupid.
Because the Nazi thing, if you wanted to, I don't know if you have something for this. Because that's I don't know, it doesn't have this sort of the good person origin that I'm assuming you want. You know what I mean? Because you found by Nazis, then they can manipulate you.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make, I don't know, this is just an idea that popped in my head as you said that. You could make it like that she was the Manhattan Project.
Oh, that would be good.
So she was discovered by the Allied powers.
Mm-hmm. In New Mexico.
So instead of the bomb, they found her.
They found Eternal.
They found her in Mexico, where the crater is.
Yeah.
Valley.
That makes sense. Cool. All right, let's change it. She wasn't found by the Nazis. She was found by the U.S. government and turned into a weapon against their enemies.
Mm-hmm.
But she's
You
not
could have like some old Captain America style war films, you know.
exactly. But she's, super, super powerful, like Superman levels of power. And she's naive but not stupid. Like, I don't want this to be the kind of character where it's like in Wonder Woman, you have to be like, she'd be like, what is this crazy invention? It's an escalator. Like, Eternal is like savvy enough to be.
You could have her like Captain America stupid, you know, where he's like, oh, this is cool, Star Wars, that sounds fun.
But she's been around since the 40s, right?
But she only got like, started existing then, so she had to get used to all this,
all this new
culture.
shit.
And if she's been alive for that long, she probably still likes that stuff. Maybe isn't
probably.
caught up to date on the pop culture stuff.
all the
likes
Marvel
to watch,
movies.
Silent movies and stuff.
That would be pretty funny.
Still working on reading Lord of the Rings.
I'm still working on reading Lord of the Rings. But yeah, she takes people at their word. She's trusting. I think that's the best word to describe her. She's trusting, which is a good thing and a bad thing. And that's kind of the thesis statement of this whole show, is that your strengths are also your weaknesses. And then we have Dr. Collider, who is a normal man who, after falling into the Large Hadron Collider, gained enormous telekinetic powers and began fighting crime. But he has grown numb to the suffering of mankind, And I imagine this guy, he's green, right? He wears like his tattered lab coat and stuff, his scientist clothes, but they're all tattered and fucked up, and he doesn't care. And he sits crisscross applesauce and, with his, hands crossed like he's meditating, and he just floats everywhere. All right? That's kind of his thing. Dr. Collider. And those are the three main trio of superheroes who all work together to create the WBO, the World Betterment Organization. And then our final, main character, who's not really going to be in the show a whole lot, is Luster, who is Malice's first sidekick, beloved by all, and is kind of, a Dick Grayson wannabe in a sort.
Yeah, I figured by that name.
Yeah, Luster. I think that's a good superhero name.
Because he's got luscious hair.
He's got luscious hair. He's lustful. He's all that stuff. And our final character is Sparrow, the latest Sparrow, probably like Sparrow 16 or something, but we'll only call her Sparrow. And she's a very young woman who was recently recruited into Malice's war on crime. She's innocent, kind, but tougher than she looks, and smart as a tack, right? And we're not really gonna get into the backstories here, but
what was the name of the show again?
Corruption of the Innocent.
Corruption of the Innocent. Okay.
Yeah, it's a reference to a book that came out. If you know anything about the history of comics, you know about the Comics Code Authority, which started after the releasing of a book called Corruption of the Innocent, which talked about how bad comic books are for children.
Yeah.
So they're
bad for kids.
They're bad for kids. Don't let your kids read them or they'll be gay. That was what
watch movies instead. Watch Clint Eastwood shoot some people.
Yeah, he's never kissed a boy in his whole life, Clint Eastwood hasn't. And your kids won't either after watching all those movies of his. Probably. Who knows? So this is...
I don't know, you might see Clint Eastwood and
be like,
things start melding in your mind.
Yeah, now I want to kiss a boy with no name. And a big poncho.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go shoot some people.
And shoot some people. And be gay and kill people. That's what Clint Eastwood taught me how to do.
That's the dream. Yep.
So this is a classic noir story, right? Classic noir. So guess how it starts.
He's in the smoky office, and a dame comes in, and she says, I got a case.
There's a murder.
That's classic noir start.
Yeah, I know, but
that's the murder, that's what happens, and then they're just, she's like, oh, there's a murder. He's like, oh, a murder. I don't know if I do that anymore.
Trust me, the femme fatale, she comes later. Don't worry.
Okay.
This episode starts with Smoke sitting in his smoky office, as you predicted. Having a cigarette, shooting the shit with Gorgax, just talking. And all of a sudden, an old, grizzled man with a walking stick walks in. And we find out that this man is Malice, out of costume, in his civilian clothing. And he begins talking to Smoke, and,
like how old,
like 50s.
George Clooney old? Okay.
Yeah, like 50s, I would say. He's like Batman
Played by George Clooney.
in The Dark
that's
Knight
what you should do.
Returns. Yes,
That'd be sick, actually. You should have
would
George Clooney play him.
that would be pretty sick. That's awesome. I hadn't even thought about that. Yes, get George Clooney in. He plays it. He plays Malice, and he comes in and he starts talking to Smoke, and there's obviously there's a rift between them that's developed because of a bunch of different reasons, you know? And it's a father and son sort of relationship, but they both kind of hate each other, but also kind of miss each other, you know? And he breaks the news to Smoke that Luster has been murdered, and he needs to find the murderer. Malice can't do it because he's too busy training all of his sparrows, you know? And we kind of get...
He's old.
Yeah, he's old, and we get the impression throughout the show that he doesn't really care all that much about the sidekicks. He's like, you accepted the risks of, you know, doing this job. If you die, you die. That's what happens. And it's like, okay, fucking lunatic. But he wants someone to find the murderer, because Luster was the first, and he was arguably the best sparrow he ever had.
Yep.
But he also wants to keep this incident within the
wraps.
family.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I see.
And he
Because
begins.
he did it.
Exactly. No, I wish that would actually be. It would be a worse twist, but it would be a twist.
Uh-oh.
And he starts by saying, this is highly irregular. Because if he just died in a supervillain fight or something, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But he died in his bed, asleep, in his civilian clothing.
Oh.
So you need to find out whether or not this murder happened because he was a hero, or it was just a random act of violence.
He was Luster.
And you need to find out if the murderer knows the rest of their identities, because that could mean that we're all in danger.
Yeah.
So it starts, obviously, Smoke goes to his apartment. He goes to Luster's apartment, and we can have a cool demonstration of his power. He, has a cigarette, he blows the smoke, and he, manipulates the smoke.
Oh, it shows, all the dust in the room or something like that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then
so you can see, I don't know.
He can use the smoke to, manipulate it and open the lock, right?
Oh, that'd be cool.
And he walks in,
clicks.
and he just starts investigating.
You can have a cool shot. He, takes a big puff of the cigarette, blows it all into the lock,
Yeah, and then you
shot
see
from,
him
inside the lock. Look cool.
twirling his hand to do something, and then it pops open. And he walks in, pops a cigarette back in his mouth, just walks in and starts looking around, doing some detective work. And he goes through, because this guy's basically his brother, his estranged brother,
Yeah.
but they're still brothers. And so he's like,
Maybe got a picture together on the wall, makes him sad.
Makes him sad, but also
Maybe he turns it around so he doesn't have to see it because it makes him sad.
That's a good idea, because they're very strange, because, little spoiler alert, Smoke highly disapproves of what Malice does, and he sees Luster, staying on with him and helping him to train the sparrows as, tantamount to child abuse. This is not okay, what you're doing. You need to stop it. And that's where they kind of stop talking, and the rift really forms there. But now this is years
but
later.
He still likes him,
Yeah, of course. He still loves him. They're brothers. And he investigates. He doesn't really find very much, this guy's squeaky clean. He doesn't even have, any problems. He doesn't even have any alcohol in his house. He's that squeaky clean. But he does find a matchbook for the Cat Scratch brothel. Or the Cat Scratch Lounge, which is a brothel for supers. It's like this.
Oh.
This is a building, that has complete soundproofing, right? All of the people working there are specialized in, in doing superhero stuff, right? And it's also where superheroes go to have sex with other people, right? So they go there to have sex with superheroes, and they also go there to have sex with, somebody else, right? You get a flame person. Speaking of whom is coming up, you get a flame person, you get them in a flame retardant room, right? Something like that. It's specialty equipment for specialty superhero sex. And so he gets there, and he starts asking around. You know, people recognize him because he's pretty well known within the super community as being a former Sparrow turned private eye, but he's also like a hard-nosed piece of shit. Like, people know that about him. And he reunites with his old...
People know him, but he doesn't have a good reputation.
Exactly. He's a noir detective, so he's got
infamous.
Yeah. And he,
as the kids say.
He reunites with his old flame. Can you guess her name?
Barbara Gordon.
Flame. Her name is Flame, and she's got flame powers. She's always on fire. Because where there's smoke, there's fire, and it's a whole thing, you know?
I see, I getcha.
But Johnny
Storm.
She just, like, fucks with him. She starts mocking him, you know? And making fun of him, and talking about how much better Luster was in bed. Because turns out...
Sounds like their relationship ended well.
Yeah. Well, it turns out Luster had been dating for a few weeks, but he broke it off like 2 days before, and she hasn't even heard that he's dead yet. No one has, besides Malice. You know, and Smoke.
Damn.
And so she's just like, you know, completely oblivious. So he finds that out, and he sees some people that he recognizes, you know, sees some suspicious activity, some goons, you know, about. And he decides to leave, you know. He's gotten what little information he could today. He'll go to sleep, you know, he'll finish a bottle of whiskey by himself because he's a drunk, and go to sleep and start thinking about it tomorrow when he's hungover, nice and hungover.
Yeah.
And as he's walking home...
Maybe he thinks best when he's hungover.
Yeah, that could be
fun.
That'd be a fun thing.
So he has to get really drunk so he can
solve the case. And so he walks home, and as he's walking home, he is beset by a team of assassins. And so he uses all of his, like, kung fu training he got from being a Sparrow and his superpowers to dispatch all these assassins, you know, rather easily. He doesn't kill them, but he, you know, knocks them out and does all the superhero stuff. And then
Let me ask a quick question about his powers. How messed up does it get? Does he just, like, you know, make weapons, or is he, like, putting it inside their bodies and, like, choking them from the inside?
He could put it inside of somebody's... Like, I do have a scene in my head, which will be happening in episode 6, in which he blows smoke in somebody's face, and then, like, you know that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End where Davy Jones, like, all his tentacles go inside a guy's mouth and nose and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, crack his face open.
Like that.
It'd be like that, but with smoke.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
It gets fucked up. But, you know, at the beginning of the show, it's not as fucked up. You know, it's kind of...
He blows some smoke in someone's face, you have cancer now.
Yeah.
It's like that episode of Harley Quinn.
Yeah, exactly. That good show that people like, and I like also, because it's funny.
It sounded sarcastic when he said that, but he meant it.
I do mean it. It's a good show. But yeah, anyways. And he finds on the assassins, he searches them, and he finds an order for Smoke's assassination made by Senator Roethlisberger. Dun dun dun. So you're like, what's he got to do with anything?
Is he a Pittsburgh Steeler?
Yes. End of episode 1, I should say. Episode 2. This episode starts with Smoke sitting inside the Malice dungeon, whatever you want to call it, the Batcave of this universe. And there's like 15 Sparrows around him all doing training and stuff. And he is interviewing / interrogating Malice and all of his Sparrows, trying to figure out, you know... Yeah, well, he said, here I have written, he interviews and interrogates Malice and his Sparrows, determining them to be morally bankrupt, brainwashed fascists, but innocent of the crime. You know?
He's probably, maybe, is he finding this, like, obvious, or is it like, you know, he's gleaning into stuff because he has this biased view of what they're doing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, he's kind of, you know, this is gonna be determined throughout the show, but Smoke has a very big distrust of authority, you know, stemming back to his tragic backstory, which we're not gonna get into here. But, you know, and Malice thought he could, you know, use that rebellious, you know, anger and forge it into a weapon for fighting for the system rather than against it. But Smoke, you know, he realized he's not the same as Malice. He's not the same as Luster. He's not gonna fight for a system he knows to be corrupt just because it's better than the alternative, right? And so he kind of sees sparrows as, he sees them, and this isn't exactly true within the universe, but he kind of sees them as the next generation of like Hitler Youth, of these crazy brainwashed kids who've been like totally, convinced that this violent, fascistic method of keeping the peace is the only way to move forward. He's like, nah, I don't.
So that's how he sees it, because he has this sort of personal grudge. He's got his own bias mixed in there.
Yeah.
To hate it.
And
but they're really trying to help people.
They are trying to help people. And I would say that neither Smoke or Malice is 100% right or 100% wrong, right? The truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Because it's weird and a bad idea that he's fucking brainwashing these kids into punching criminals. But also you need, like, some authority, right, to keep the world from falling apart. So there's the truth is somewhere in the middle. But and this scene, this part of the show is really only there to introduce Sparrow, the latest introduction, and she is, like I said, brash and young and smart and cunning, and she's cool, and I'm basing her kind of heavily off of kind of a mixture of Carrie Kelly and Stephanie Brown, right? She's got like long, thick blonde hair. Everything, and she begins talking to him because she's the only one who's not really been she hasn't been fully convinced that Malice's way is the only way to do it. And so she starts talking to him and asking him questions that the other sparrows just would not have done, because it's like, we don't ask questions. Malice tells us what to do. He'll ask the questions. He's the detective. We're his helpers. And she's asking him questions. So then she's like, why did you leave? What's the thing? And Sparrow, Smoke, he takes a puff of his cigarette, he looks at her, says, why don't you ask him, And whatever he tells you, you come find me, and I'll tell you the truth, right? And then he leaves. And then kind of the rest of the episode...
Damn, what a dick.
Yeah, he's a dick.
Just tell her, she asks you a question, you're gonna make her ask this other dude now, and then come back and ask if that was actually it or not.
Yeah, he's a dick. But so is Malice, so it's, fair. And so the rest of this episode is kind of Sparrow talking to Malice, talking to the other sparrows, and, like, getting the backstory that they have on him, And Malice's basic explanation of why Smoke was fired was because he was too soft, He grew too compassionate for those on the wrong side of the law, right? He was a liability to himself and to, the rest of the team, so I had to cut him loose, right? And that's what she's like, okay, fair enough, that's fine. But that compassionate, like, caring person is not who just interrogated everyone. Like, he's not that guy at all, so it's like, oh, maybe that's not 100% what happened. And so she decides to go find him, and she's walking around, she walks through the city, seeing all this stuff. We watch superheroes fly up above. It's a whole thing. It's a little walking tour of this world. And she gets there, she gets to his detective agency, and she, has a nice conversation with Gorkax while he's sleeping off the half a bottle of whiskey he drank. He wakes up, goes out to talk to her, and he explains that what actually happened is, well, Malice is actually a billionaire, believe it or not. I know.
Oh,
where could you think of that?
I kind of just assumed already.
And so Smoke, without Malice's knowledge or, approval, sets up a fund to take care of all the people that Malice cripples. He sets up a fund for, like, making sure that people who get their arms and legs broken by Malice don't go into bankruptcy because of the healthcare system. Right? That was the big, horrible offense that he did. And Malice says, oh, it's a flashback sequence. He says, oh, you're just you care about these criminals, you're soft, you're weak, all this stuff. And he's like, no, I just don't think that our justice should bankrupt people, right? You shouldn't be bankrupted because we stopped you from, robbing someone. You're already going to, jail, you already got a broken arm, all this stuff. You shouldn't also, be in debt for the rest of your life. And so that's kind of where the big rift comes, but the rift was already building because Smoke, his superpowers developed after he became a sparrow. And so Malice, who we've introduced this at this point, but he has kind of a hatred of superpowered individuals. He sees them as a necessary evil for maintaining peace, but he kind of sees them as less than human, right? And so as soon as Smoke's powers like demonstrate themselves, he's like, hide it, bury it deep, all this stuff. And so there's this sort of growing anonymity that erupts when Smoke gets this fund going for all the broken and battered people that Malice deals with, right? And so he gets fired and he starts his detective agency. And this episode 2 ends with Flame walking in to Smoke's detective agency in tears, in her big trench coat and her big floppy hat, because it is a noir and she's the femme fatale. She walks in tears and she's like, I just heard about Luster, End of episode. Start of episode 3, she's, in there having a conversation with Smoke and Sparrow, and, she's talking about him and talking about Luster and talking about all the strange things that have been happening. And she mentions that, oh yeah, I've seen Senator Roethlisberger, recently. He sent me his regards. I'm very, I was appreciative. And Smoke is like suspicious again, because Senator Roethlisberger is the one who sent those assassins after him. So he's like, all right, I'm gonna do some recon on this Roethlisberger character. Thank you, Flame. If there's anything else you need, let me know. Call me, whatever. He gives her, his personal phone number or something like that, which he doesn't do for regular clients. And that's when she leaves, Sparrow is like, I'm gonna help. He may have been your brother, but he was my brother too. We do like a flashback to her early training when Luster was taking care of her, and he's a much softer individual than Malice, and he was like taking care of her, making sure like you fall but you get back up, and that sort of thing. And so she's like equally as emotionally invested in this case as Smoke, and he just kind of relents. He's like, fine, you can help me do recon, but if there's any, fighting that needs to happen, you leave it to me, all right? You're not ready for the field yet. That sort of thing. And so they go to Roethlisberger's, mannerly estate, and they just watch him for hours and hours, and he's just a morally upstanding family man. That's all they really see is him, like, helping his kids with their homework and, mowing the grass and, like, helping his wife pick out a new dining room table and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And then they're just about to leave when he gets in his car at about midnight and drives to a parking lot, right? In the middle of nowhere. And so another car pulls up. There's a quick, exchange of stuff, a little conversation, and then the other car leaves. But before it leaves, Smoke is able to place a small tracking device on it to keep an eye on it. And then he, like, Batman style scares the shit out of the senator, like tears open the top of the car and like starts like talking to him, and he's like, what the hell are you doing? Why'd you send a murderous squad after me? What do you know about Luster's murder? And he's like, holy shit, you're still alive? Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I thought you were investigating me. And I was like, investigating you? Why would I investigate you? It's like, because of the affair I'm having at the Cat Scratch Lounge with another superheroine.
Oh.
And, well, it could be a superheroine that we've introduced before. I haven't figured out which one. But he's like, well, now I know that you're having an affair, you piece of shit, and if you don't want your wife to know, you're gonna give me access to all the CCTV cameras in the city. Oh, okay. And he uses those CCTV cameras to see who was the last person to go into Luster's apartment. And it was Eternal. It's the last person to see him alive. And that's kind of the end of the episode, is Sparrow and Smoke both looking at themselves like, oh my god, what the fuck? Our Superman analog is the last person to see him alive? Is she the murderer? End of episode 3. Episode 4, Smoke and, what do you call it? Smoke and Sparrow go up to the WBO, moon base. Oh, no, sorry. That's later. Smoke meets up with Captain Tide, a supervillain, who trades his ex-wife File for it's an entropium. Entropium. That's what it's called.
What?
So Captain Tide is this supervillain, right? Who, whose ex-wife asked Smoke to do some research on him, right? So Smoke has this whole file of Captain Tide's affair that he had. And so, Captain Tide's ex-wife, is currently suing him for a bunch, and she's going to use his affair as evidence in the court case. And so Captain Tide buys the evidence off of Smoke for a rare element known as entropium, which is Eternal's only weakness. I know. Where did I get all these ideas? And you'll have fun noticing that Eternal's weakness comes from is entropium, which comes from the word entropy, which was the last name of the show that we did. Oh my god! Yeah. And after he gets this, this evidence.
Just waiting for you to all of a sudden be like, and then a space wizard comes out of nowhere, grabs Smoke, and says, "We're going off to space, man.
We're gonna fight the end of time, and there's big monsters there. It's gonna be rad. You're gonna deal with a cowboy from space." And so Smoke does this. He gets the element, he puts it in his desk, right, to make his life just a bit easier, in case Eternal is the one who murdered, and who murdered Luster. And then he gets home, and the full weight of his brother's death kind of hits him for the first time, right? Like he ends up going through a family, a yearbook sort of situation, and looking at his first year on the job, fighting crime, and Luster being there and helping him out, and we get some flashbacks and all this
maybe
stuff.
It's it's his birthday, right?
Yeah.
And every year Luster sends him something. What's something that you would like? It sends him a cake,
Yeah,
or
a pack of cigarettes.
Something nice, a pack of cigarettes, right? And he had it already sent. Mm-hmm. And so it shows up, and that's what triggers the.
Yeah. And so he gets super drunk in the middle of the day, far too drunk to do anything. And that kind of just leaves Sparrow to do the last of the investigations, right? And so Sparrow begins interviewing, going around and interviewing all of Luster's friends from his various superhero outings. And everyone loves Luster. Luster was the bomb diggity. He was the coolest guy around. He made everyone want to be a better hero, all this stuff. And the only person that keeps coming up as a potential enemy is Smoke. Smoke is the only person who ever had a problem with him. So this is when Sparrow starts to develop her theory that Smoke actually is the murderer. And he's just, playing Malice to figure it out.
I like this. You could be intercutting between the two, the scene where she's investigating and she thinks it's Smoke, and Smoke being really sad that his brother's dead.
Yeah, and we have a flashback, and
back and forth.
Nice flashback, and then we do a bad flashback where they get into a big fight, all this stuff. Could do a flashback one time where Luster bails Smoke out of prison. He's been in, he got, disorderly conduct or whatever, and he bails him out. And it's a whole thing. So this is kind of a flashback-heavy episode. Not a lot of fighting, but I hope to make up for that in the next 2 episodes. So, Sparrow, this is episode 5. Sparrow suspects Smoke of the murder, but he is none the wiser. So, after sobering up, he invites her to go up to the WBO's moon headquarters to do a little bit of more investigation and interviewing, right? Because that's where Eternal lives, and she's shocked, right? She's never been up there. Sparrows are not allowed to go up to the moon headquarters, right? That's for heroes only, not sidekicks, blah blah blah. But Smoke still has a working pass because he used to go up there all the time. So she gets there, he gets there, and this is the big superhero money shot of the show. It's there's tons and tons of superheroes, but it's kind of revealed through like background dialogue and background, actions that these superheroes don't care about like natural disasters or anything like that. They only care about doing, things. They only care about helping people when it means there's someone for them to punch. They're not really interested in like just doing good work. They're not interested in damage control or anything like that. They're only interested in like punching people, like all the violence and the fame that come along with those violences, right? And that sort of thing. And so this is when they interview Eternal, right? And she just she tells the truth, right? She's just going over there to talk to Luster about, some important information. And it's revealed that Luster was going to ask Flame to marry him. And so Luster had talked to Eternal about like what to do, where could they get a nice enough stone, and she like went off to like some place in space to get like a crazy super refined diamond for him and all this stuff, Like Luster's a really good guy. And he also talks with Dr. Collider, who is weird. He's kind of a halfway mark between Dr. Manhattan and Superman, sort of. And he's very weird, but it's also obvious to Smoke, less so to Sparrow, but it's obvious to Smoke that they are talking around something. There is something big that both Eternal and Dr. Collider are attempting not to mention and like trying to avoid even like thinking about, right? And Smoke knows that this has something to do with the murder, right? So he is like, all right, Sparrow, this is your first assignment as my sidekick. You're going to download the contents of the database on the WBO Moon headquarters. And she's like, well, how am I going to be able to do that? There's people watching these computers all the time. He's like, well, I'm going to have a distraction. And so this is going to be the big fight of the show. And this is Smoke decides to pick not the big fight of the show, big fight of the episode. He decides to pick a fist fight with his old rival, Max. It's MAXXX, right? And he gets his power from liquor. That's where he gets his super strength from. That's why it's XXX, because that's what they have on the old liquor bottles.
I see.
Yeah, so he decides to pick a fight with him, and it turns this big, like, station-wide brawl of all these superheroes who are just right on the edge of, like, just constantly being crazy violent. This is a little bit of a Kingdom Come thing, the DC comic Kingdom Come, where all these new superheroes are, like, crazy violent, and they don't give a shit about people at all, right? And that's, like, kind of the vibe I want to give. And they're like right on the edge, and they just need that little catalyst, that little spark to start this powder keg of violence. And so they all start battling. They start kicking the shit out of each other. Somebody throws somebody through the window that is keeping space out, and so like people go flying out into space and all this stuff. And it's a whole thing. And while this is happening, Smoke knocks out Max. Finds Sparrow, and she has the information downloaded, and they escape. They like slip out the back, basically. But it's a moon base, so they just teleport down to Earth.
Yeah.
And then it ends with them getting back to Smoke's office and decoding the USB or whatever they got the information on. And looking at it, and then you can see them, like, as the screen illuminates, it's the only light in the scene. Screen illuminates and start, like, displaying all this information. Both their faces drop, and they're just like, oh my god, what the fuck? This is crazy.
Cut to black. Boom. Everyone's like, what? What is it? I want to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Next episode.
End of episode 5. Start of episode 6, the final episode. And I'm imagining episodes are roughly half an hour long, right? But this episode is a whole hour, right? It's a double feature.
Boy.
Because there's a lot
you
going
love when
on.
that happens.
So, this is...
Our finale.
So, we find out that the thing that they found was a new anti-crime initiative created by Dr. Collider, right? Because he's a crazy super smart scientist. And it's basically this enormous beam that they've built into the World Betterment Organization that releases a supersonic, sound that... How do I want to put this? It lobotomizes people into not feeling anti-authority sentiment, right? Not feeling anti-authority sentiment. So basically, what Dr. Collider's plan is to turn the whole of humanity into very, accepting, or not accepting, but like, they'll do whatever you tell them. They'll not resist. They won't, complain or anything like that. Right, just lobotomizing them with this crazy technology, right? But it won't affect any superpowered individuals. So that's why...
So it's like... So his sort of... He's like Thomas Hobbes, like the philosopher. He's like, no matter who the main authority is, you should follow them.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless, because rebellion is always going to be worse. You should always have unaccountable... obedience to
unaccountable obedience to me, Dr. Collider, because he's
to him specifically, not
he's
because there's governments, right?
Yeah, but he's lobotomizing all humanity, not just the populace, but everyone.
So does it make them not want to rebel against they'll listen to him? Is that what the idea?
They'll
like
listen
the brainwashing him,
they'll listen to
or just
him,
authority in general.
Just authority in general, but he is kind of been setting up this whole thing for the superheroes to take over planet-wide authority, right? The World Betterment Organization.
So what the laser does is remove the will to resist.
Yeah, you remember in Rick and Morty when Rick gets on the on the plane, right? But they like inject him with something that makes him docile and anti-authority, not having any anti-authority sentiment. It's that, but for the whole of humanity. Right? And Malice, obviously, they didn't tell Malice because he's the only non-superhero member of the World Betterment Organization, right?
Oh.
And
Batman doesn't know.
Batman doesn't know. Superman Superwoman and Dr. Manhattan do know because they're fucking crazy. But Dr.
God.
Yeah.
Is this Injustice?
But Eternal, right?
DC
Eternal, I think... It depends on how dark you want to get it, because we can have Dr. Collider having been, because he's a crazy telekinetic Dr. Manhattan level of power. So we could have it so he's, altering her brain chemistry in such a way that she will listen to what he says, right? She's this very docile character to him, right?
Yeah. So he's manipulating her into agreeing.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is...
You could have something like, maybe he has like, because she has the weakness of like kryptonite, whatever her name is, intrepidite or whatever.
Entrepium.
You got multiple colors of kryptonite in DC Comics. You could have a different color that he's using to help control her in some
Maybe
way.
she's like, put it in her brain, right? And so she doesn't remember.
Okay, I'm going all out here. He found this rock that makes her like this, right? Makes her not resistant to authority, and he's the authority, right?
Yeah.
And they use that same rock to make this beam.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. That is smart. Yeah, I like that. And so...
I don't know if that messes up any of your ideas.
No, it doesn't, because... Yeah, no, it doesn't. So Smoke is like, I have to go confront them because they're gonna use this beam like today or whatever soon. And so we see him grab the Entrepium from his desk and put it in his back pocket, right? And he said, Sparrow, go back to Malice, tell him what you found, he'll know what to do from there, right? And so she, reluctantly at first, because she wants to go up and help him fight the supervillains, but he's like, no, you need to go to Malice and get his help, right? And
so even though he has a strained relationship with Malice, he knows that he's like the only person that can really help him with this.
And so after finding out all this stuff, Smoke goes back up to the World Betterment Organization Mood headquarters, right? And he confronts the true killer, Dr. Collider, who had used his telekinetic powers to shapeshift into Eternal in order to go inside and murder Luster. because Luster was the only other person, the only, you know, other person who knew about his plan. And so that's why he broke off ties with Flame and everything, because he knew that if he revealed this plan or tried to put a stop to it, he would most likely end up dead, and he didn't want her to end up dead too.
I see.
And so he goes up there, and he starts having a fist fight, right, with the superheroes, and that's when we kind of get a huge demonstration of really truly how powerful Smoke is, because, you know, maybe something's on fire and he's able to like choke out like 6 superheroes at once, but then Eternal just busts through and starts like beating the shit out of him.
Should go full Darth Vader with it. Like he should be like holding his hand like Vader to choke him.
Yeah, that'd be very cool.
I want the hallway scene in Rogue One, but with Smoke, where he chokes like 6 superheroes at once.
Yeah, and then he's,
you know, because he's always been holding himself back because he's always about not hurting people that much, but you know, this time he's cutting loose.
Yeah, but he's still not killing, right? That I want it to be very much he's not killed anyone yet. And so he's having this big fight, right, with him, and he's about to lose. You know, he's getting his ass kicked because there's one of him and 60 of them. But then we revealed, guess who's in the main headquarters of the WBO's Moon Quarters security system? That's right, Gorgax has taken over the security measures.
Oh yeah,
and he's turned all these guns on the dudes, and he's just blowing them away, like, you know, non-lethal rounds or whatever. Like electrocuting them and all this stuff, and then that's when Eternal just like busts through and starts like beating the shit out of him, and he's really getting the shit beat out of him. And he reaches into his back pocket and stabs her right in the side with the Entrepium, and that causes a negative feedback loop between the little bit of the crystal that's in her brain being used to control her and the Entrepium in her side, and it explodes both of them. And so she becomes like, she gets knocked out, but she's no longer, you know, under Dr. Collider's control. She's no longer under the
spell. Nice.
But there's, you know, the superheroes by this point have destroyed the security measures and all this stuff. And that's when Malice and about fucking 16 Sparrows show up with all their anti-superhero equipment that Malice has been, you know, hoarding.
Yeah.
And they just, it's like this all-out war. And Dr. Collider and Smoke are having it out, you know, they're beating the shit out of each other. And this is the scene, finally, when Smoke just gives in to his inner, you know, anger. And he does what I was describing earlier, where he blows the smoke in Dr. Collider's face and then crushes every, like, inch of his skull into one, like, tiny, like, a fist-sized shape, you know? Liquidizes the inside of his brain. And this is the first life he's ever taken. And he's like...
It's like the scene at the end of Man of Steel.
Exactly. But he's like, it's